I'm very excited to bring back Paul Mangione from Fort Schuyler Advisors, which is the New York-based advisory firm concentrating on the structured credit, consumer and residential debt, whole loan transaction, evaluating of portfolios. We had Paul on the podcast a year ago, and a lot has changed. I know Paul brought a lot of data that I'm excited to dive into because we have mixed signals on the market. It looks like the labor data came in soft, and supposedly the markets are up. Trump is telling us the economy is doing great, but there's something that tells me that delinquencies are up, and it's controversial to and opposite to what Trump is saying. So let's dive into the data. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Great, thanks, Alex. Yes, it was a year ago, and I went through my notes from last call, and it was just interesting to see what's changed, what we've seen in the markets, and then also specifically, I kept wanting to do this podcast with you, but things kept changing and changing. I'm like, "God, I got to keep updating my data here." So I think we got a little summer calm here, so we can chat and talk about it some more. But let me bring up the charts and we can kind of.
Yeah, let's dive in. You have a lot of data. I looked at it prior to us jumping in the podcast. Boy, I have so many questions. Let's start looking at it and evaluating what does it mean for the economy, for the mortgage market, for the capital markets, for the debt um, servicing. So let's get started. Where do you want to
Right.
start? Well,
Well, let's start here. So here we're looking at um, the 10-year, the 30-year mortgage rate in blue, the 10-year in red, and then the Fed funds rate. Right. So last year, I think we were around here. It was before rates started being cut, and we can see, uh, between we had this benefit where, in anticipation of rates getting cut, the 10-year did go down a bit, and then we were, I think, and we'll look at this. Uh, we were on track in 2024 to be the lowest year of mortgage originations in at least recent history, 30 years of history. Uh, when we got that drop, we had more origination, more purchases, more refis. We kind of went right back, so we're still kind of in this range in the high 6%. Um, we did finally get, I think, in early 2024, they were talking about 6 to 7 rate cuts, so we should be down here somewhere at 3.5%. We didn't get that. We got a fair amount less, and then the rate cuts have really been halted the last few months here. Um, and I guess we kind of see this. The Fed started cutting, and then rates started going up. The 30-year and the 10-year started going up. So, why? Well, I guess the markets had anticipated those rate cuts a little bit, but then there's a lot of issues around uh, the U.S. deficit, the U.S. credit rating, and uh, those items. I think Moody's finally did cut lower the sovereign U.S. rating down from AAA. They were the last one to do it. S&P had done it in 2011. Fitch, maybe I think 2014, and now Moody's finally caught up with everybody else. But the issue that we're really seeing now is like, where are rates going to go? How is the consumer getting to be affected? I think that's kind of like what I'm always looking at. Like, rates basically are the rates drive the market. Rates drive lending. Rates drive business. So, kind of just from a consumer standpoint, we kind of look at, well, where does the consumer stand now in terms of the volumes?
yeah. So really, the prior slide tells a story that we are higher for longer, as Feds promised us. We anticipated it, but everybody hoped that the rates will drop. They didn't get that, and for all the businesses that were counting on the rates to drop and hoping that any day they'll get the relief for the rates and the increase in origination volume, they didn't get it.
Right. And we have this push from the Trump administration and Powell, the Federal Reserve chair, really hidden pushing for rates, threatening to, maybe have him removed. It looks like that's cleared, but his term ends in beginning of next year. Um, and there are some openings on the Federal Reserve's board. And so I think between Trump appointing, I think, two seats there, and then also Powell exiting more likely in 2026, you're going to see, a more dovish Fed, and we may see at least the federal funds rates go down. That doesn't mean that the 10 years going to go down. That doesn't mean the mortgage rates goes down. Right? That's controlled by the buying, the sale, and demand of 10-year treasuries. But kind of going to where the consumer is. This is from and all my charts are publicly available. I'll give the sources. This is from the Federal Reserve uh, consumer credit package they do every quarter. Um, and what was really important to see is like where the consumer is at. So student loans, 1.7 trillion, that's in red. Credit cards, smaller than student loans, 1.3 trillion, blue. Auto, 1.7 trillion in green. And this one's actually going to be important. We'll go back to this multiple times. Home equity revolving. So that's bank HELOCs. Uh, Small, but grown a lot from its on a percentage of its in the last few years. And then the big orange line, that's going to be mortgages. So that's the 13 trillion of mortgages. So total 18.39 trillion. Up slightly from when we talked a year ago. Uh, the mix is changing, but here's the big thing. This is what we anticipated last time. We were talking about student loans a lot, right? Back a year ago, student loans were still uh, slowly going back out of forbearance into a payment status for most borrowers coming out of COVID. Uh, and this was the easiest call in the world, right? We kind of said we were kind of back here. The red line is the student loan 90 plus delinquencies, right? So we went from, and I remember us talking about this, like expected it's going to go from effectively zero to 10%, which is kind of like, or slightly above 10%. That's the kind of going rate of student loan delinquency from 2012 to 2020, pre-COVID.
So
Uh,
10% of the students are delinquent?
10% are 90 plus days delinquent, meaning that, and they're not in any kind of non-payment status. So this is true delinquency, according to the banks and the Fed. Um, That means there's non-payment, and a lot of the promises. And when we spoke a year ago, Joe Biden was still running for president. Um, he was talking still about student loan forgiveness, repayment plans. Now that Donald Trump is president, they're talking about, um, you know, getting people to pay and going after your paycheck. Right? That's not something that's happened in the past. Garnishing your wages. The IRS always garnished your uh, tax refund for student loan repayment if you were in for any kind of government loan, but your wages were never garnished. That is something that's kind of really changing, and ultimately that would affect consumer spending and ultimately the economy. Uh, Another thing that we kind of talked about, I think we a year ago, is the blue line, credit card delinquency, right? So credit card delinquency, obviously, during COVID, it went down significantly because of all the government transfer payments, PPP, ERC, STIMI checks, everything, all the above, right? Delinquency went down significantly. And then after COVID, we said, okay, it's going to go above. Maybe it's just going to go above pre-COVID levels. It kind of hit it and went well above it, right? So we're going back to now levels that were in this era, right? This is a great financial crisis, post '08 to 2011, 2012. And, we'll go at the end of the talk, we'll kind of see what the status changes. It seems like it's rolling down a little bit. That's good. Uh, our, of course, typical consumer transportation, auto loans. Uh, this one, not too much wiggle back and forth. It went up, it's kind of flattening a little bit. And then we'll go into some detail in a second. But
Well,
who's about
yeah,
mortgage and home equity?
yeah. Do you support the thesis that first-time home buyers, students, folks that are renters are suffering the most in this economy, and that explains this chart from the perspective of home equity loans and the mortgages are being at the lowest. So folks are holding on to their low rates for the regular mortgages that they refinanced a few years back. But folks that don't have those mortgages and they have to pay for the cars, they have to pay off the student loans, they are in a pool of the first time home buyers. And therefore, we're not even talking about affordability issue or index. We're talking about people staying afloat uh, based on this chart. Do you
I
support the
mean,
same thesis? Yeah.
student loans are a huge drag on for first-time home buyers for qualifications and then for just monthly budget. So that's something that two or three generations ago they didn't see that same $100,000 debt that they had and payments. And you see a lot of like sob stories on Twitter and TikTok of people talking about, "Hey, I made payments for 10 years and I'm still at the same balance." Because and some of that's a lot of that's gotta be private loans with very high coupons and paying the minimum payment or below, the minimum payment, but it definitely affects and we'll talk about the the real estate, residential real estate, in a second, but it definitely affects qualifications, home buyers. But the other issue is that it's still cheaper to rent in most markets. And so if you're trying to figure out your budget, it's cheaper to rent. Now, ideally, many people, 69, I think 67% of Americans, want to have a home and own their home versus rent it. But from affordability standpoint, I think in dozens and dozens of major markets, it's cheaper to rent, and in some parts by 50%. This is just mortgage, insurance, and taxes. It doesn't include even maintenance. So, uh, it is a drag on first time home buyers. And I think that's something that long term we got to consider is like how do we get those people into affordable houses? It's not going to come from the Fed manipulating the 10-year rate, all right? Because there's also a lot of pressure on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Like they're not buying significant amounts of mortgages and treasuries anymore. Uh, there's no QE or limited QE. So like I think the answer is like where is the income going to come from? It's not going to come. It's not going to come from, or where's the excess cash flow to make that mortgage payment going to come from? It's got to come from income growth and moving to more affordable markets, and we'll get into that as well. But lastly, uh, mortgage and home equity, lowest delinquency, and why is that? It's because there's massive amounts of uh, equity in residential real estate market. So, and we'll kind of show how big that is. Uh, on autos, we were kind of showing autos kind of low here, but we'll kind of click forward. Different story when you kind of break it out between prime and subprime. So this is 60 plus delinquency, not 90. This is from Fitch. Uh, and if you look at obviously the blue line prime, very low, sub 1%, and it's traditionally stayed very low, pretty flat, throughout COVID. But what's happened to subprime? So if you kind of look at the COVID kind of era here, right here, you see this big drop, right? Again, that was the transfer payments, people having additional money and not taking vacations to get their loans current. And now, once that money kind of disappeared, where are we going? We're going to levels that we have not seen, right? This is if you were around in the 90s, you remember there was a lot of subprime originators, uh, Autoflow and Tranex and AFG, lots of them that would do subprime loans, typically used car buyers, uh, and they all got washed out post, 97. It was Asian crisis and long-term capital, if you remember those, right? So we really saw spread widening and this market kind of, getting crushed. And delinquency, the volumes disappeared. We saw the peak, and then as the originators kind of got more conservative, you saw delinquencies after charge-offs, delinquency collapsed. And they stayed very conservative throughout the 2000s. Even during the great financial crisis, we saw peaks, but we're well above that now. So that's the question is like, these are the lower income and lower asset type borrowers. And so these are going to be probably sub, 680, 650 FICO borrowers. And so that's something to be concerned about, even when we looked at, student loans, like who's getting a subprime auto borrower. It's someone either that is a person that is just has less income or less credit worthiness. It could be a first time borrower. It could be
Low FICO score people. Yeah.
so. Then the question is, well, how are we going to see this affect just more about the consumer? The last two uh, items here were these are the transition rates. We can fly through these, but you can see student loans still going up. These are the 30 plus, and then this is the 90 plus. So they're still going up. Credit cards and autos, you're seeing the transition rates starting to roll over. So maybe we're at the peak levels. I mean, we're at the peak. It's acceleration versus velocity, right? So we're still going up, but at a slower pace for credit cards, autos, um, mortgages, and revolving. But student loans still spiking up, and these, and then when we get to the last kind of slides, we'll talk about kind of age ranges, and let's say the millennials versus Gen Z versus boomers, and then we'll kind of see like how that's really shaking out, especially around student loans. Kind of interesting. Uh,
Good points. Yep.
but so the with mortgages, we saw that they were the lowest delinquency. Why? Mortgages are the lowest delinquency because of this huge amount of equity, 34.5 trillion. This is from the Urban Institute. Uh, and you can see the total value, that's 48 trillion of residential real estate, only 13 plus trillion of mortgages. And we saw that on the first slide around, that was 12.9. This is 13.4. There's always a little variation. But look at
So there's enough cushion on the equity side to grab the HELOC, grab the closed in seconds,
correct.
uh, grab the reverse. So what you're saying here is we should see somewhere in the charts the explosion of home equity loans, right? So hopefully we're going to see that again. I'm um, predicting
Americans
that.
spend, right? Yeah. Like
Yeah, yeah.
when the first time I went out to California, you went out there, you're like, whoa, like everyone is spending everything. And you're like, wow, that was pretty unique to me. And that's really, California kind of drives the culture. And you're kind of seeing that that's from not only culturally, but economically. Like people like to spend money. And if they have additional equity, which we have 34 trillion, you're not going to spend all of it, but you're going to spend some of it. And that's why we're seeing like this number, this is the amount of equity during the great financial crisis, during before it, '06. Like this is cute, right? Compared to this number. Like this is, this was, uh, the numbers that were the drop in equity was, we thought was, was massive, was world changing. And now look where we are. Like, in a few years, you may not even notice this bump. So that's something we have all this equity. And as long as there's uh, reasonable rates and banks and other lenders available to lend, like borrowers are going to take advantage of that. We talked about that in the podcast a year ago. We were talking more of the home equity product, HEI, but we also talked about HELOCs and seconds. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that.
All of my clients, Paul, are talking about all of those products. They are really attacking this market. You starting to see segmentation on the marketing side. For example, there's a few folks that are focusing on the seniors, HELOCs for seniors programs. You have some programs um, related to HELOCs on top of the investment properties, and it just everybody comes up with their own program to attack this market. And people that didn't play in this market before, rating agencies started to look at the closed in seconds and HELOCs now, right? So JP Morgan started to lead with the securitizations, and now everybody's following. So that's an interesting trend to watch, and hopefully one of the slides that you have here will actually tell the story.
Yeah, it's I mean, it is still a it's a small number relatively speaking. I think we'll have that next slide here, and here it is. Yeah. So this is all of the split of the US single family mortgage market. So your agencies, are 9.5 trillion. This is current levels. Home equity loans. So this is typically your HELOCs and your seconds. So again, this is from the Urban Institute. Uh, it's point 0.6 trillion, right? So that's 600 billion. So it's still a small number, but it's up significantly from kind of, early 2020, which was around maybe, 450 billion. So we are seeing a lot of, but, borrowers still relying on the agencies, right? Uh, Unsecured, this is a bank that's more kind of jumbos and that kind of paper.
Credit unions probably fall into that
Yeah,
category, right?
private label, and then unsecured first liens, like, but it is something that uh, why are we not? We're not going to see the growth from here because a lot of borrowers have those low interest rates, and so if we kind of go forward, we can kind of see, well, where is the uh, percentage of refis, at the current mortgage rate? So current mortgage rate, kind of mid sixes. Uh, the refis are really still in, the 20-30%. Back in early 2021, 2020, we were seeing these numbers like in the 60, 70%. So, and then if you look at refinanceable share, like it's low, right? It's relatively low, sub 10%, well below, barely 5%.
Everybody's suffering. People that are processing refi transactions, people that are processing purchase transactions, the Fannie and Freddie AUL and title waiver programs. So I see a lot of people in that space are suffering. So you're showing that there's no light in sight, and the suffering will continue.
Right. And that's primarily because of, where rates are now, where their current rate is, and then that shows the rise of these other equity products. And we saw that in past years, but now with the combination of internet origination and more technology, more volume, and the ability to, uh, years ago it was very expensive to originate, right? And now combination of using there's some originators that are exclusively using AVMs, right?
For the
And that's
HELOCs? Oh, yeah, HELOCs or
yeah,
hills in seconds, right? That's now approved by rating agencies, and we just wrapped up securitization for one of our clients on close in seconds, all AVMs,
and
all of
what
them.
kind of
So
CLTV? What's the cap? I mean, I think they're not going to take you up to 80, 85 on that, but maybe they'll take.
no, yeah, it's lower than that. Exactly.
Got it. So, there's not a lot of refinanceable first liens. So really and then this is origination. So origination, we were talking about, you know, 2024 was on, it was like looking like it was going to be the lowest origination, but we had that drop in mid of mortgage rates. So we saw cl- just beat 2023, and now we're in 2025. Like this is just Q1. So if you 4x this, we're still going to be below, but let's see, we have another quarter and a half to really kind of figure out between Powell and, let's see what Trump does. Like maybe we can kind of beat 2024. Otherwise, I think this probably will be, with excluding what happens in the second lien market, we're going to see, very low originations.
That's a good asterisk point. I can tell you that if you look at the securitization of RPLs and NPLs, just to um, refinance some of the portfolios to jump in back into the market and buy some of the delinquent loans, we saw a huge uptick, right? So if you overlay this versus what's being securitized in the market, I mean, everybody who plays in the capital markets securitized what they had in the portfolio just to refinance and get ready to jump in, right? So knowing that the volume is low and knowing that first time home buyers and some of the GNA portfolios will really see a huge uptick in the delinquencies, they're ready to jump in and and take the loans, as evident by, say, hot sales, housing and urban finance, vacant property sales for the Hackems. We are seeing an uptick in the bidders, and a lot of people are planning to buy those loans. And the same thing will happen with Ginnie Mae when some of those portfolios and EBO trades will come out. But that's sort of an asterisk that you said for the capital markets, right? If you overlay that, that's going to be an interesting story.
Right. And so and we want obviously first time home buyers to have access. We want also people to have access to either their um, if they want to sell their house, buy a new house, trade up or trade down, they want the ability to do that. And it's been very hard, kind of given what the splits have been. If we look at, this next slide is this is mortgage outstanding. This is agency, but it's a
Okay.
pretty good tell for the rest of the market. This is again the Urban Institute, but the green line here is like this is interesting. If you go it was pretty. This is rates over 6%. It's pretty significant. Right? It
Yeah.
is not insignificant, even though volumes are down. What's getting originated is high and above five too. We're well into 30% here. Uh, there's still others low rates.
So some people are refinancing at below 3%, or it's a for sale, you think? In other words, people have to sell and the new buyers are getting the loan at above 6% today, right? Is that the trend that I'm reading from this chart?
Well, that's the one thing that I've seen. There was something that came out from ICE a few days ago, which was saying that there was a significant amount of mortgage originations were refis where the borrowers had paid 1.5% higher in interest rate than their current rate. So why would you do that? Why would you go ahead? I mean, you would do it probably because you need the money.
Yeah, you need equity. You need to tap into higher loan amounts.
Right.
Interesting.
You to do it on a first lien, I could see it still could make sense depending on how much equity you were pulling out to depending on how big your balance was to refi the first into just a new first and not get a second. If you had a really big balance with a very low coupon, it probably makes sense to go for that higher rate. And depending on what type of borrower, some of these rates are going to be 8, 9% for the best borrowers, but a lot are like 11%. Like there's definitely high rates there on the HELOC space, depending on the borrower. But I think the point is like there are loans getting originated in that 6%, and obviously, not everyone's gonna be able to pay that, but that's kind of what the market is right now. And then the last piece is, which will lead us to why people are looking to tap is that there's still people are not getting arms really. It's still
Yep.
it's really fallen out of favor. It's only for the highest quality, best borrowers, super prime borrowers, as some kind of income management. So it's fixed rate is still the way going post '09. Um, some of these other pieces, let's see, it's delinquency. Oh, we just skipped out for a second. This is the slide. We showed this slide last time. HELOC, Google search of the word HELOC since 2010. And obviously it was, not much in from 2010 to 2015. Uh, somewhat seasonal with the summer as people kind of pull out equity, and now we're above where we were last year. So people are still looking for
I need money.
yeah,
That's what tells me. I need money. People are saying, more and more people, I need money to make my ends meet.
and
Uh,
that's
Interesting.
and that's something that maybe we can conclude. Uh, as long as people can tap equity, they're going to keep spending, and they're going to uh, drive the economy. So I think for all the focus of looking at those, let's say the credit card rates and the subprime auto rates, delinquency going up, there's still a lot of borrowers that have the ability to spend. And so we are in this, like originally we was using a K-shaped economy. Uh, I think there's just a lot of differentiation on borrowers in the United States, and they still have access to equity, even with home prices, potentially going lower nationally. And we'll talk about why nationally is not a good thing to even look at anymore. Uh, But if borrowers can tap that 34 trillion of equity, like, they're going to spend it. And there's originators that will service that need. And as long as, excluding any kind of huge job crisis, which, that's a, different conversation. As long as borrowers, I think the only, like, there's no rate shock that we could just really see a spike in mortgage delinquency, right? We don't have a rate shock because of fixed rates has been the way to go. There has been a limited number of, I didn't put a graph in it for this, but of buy down mortgages, right? So buy downs are typically for purchase mortgages from builders. So those are typically 2 to 3 years, where the borrower gets a lower rate, basically comes out of the profit of the home builder. And so that is a potential source. But I think the real shock that could hit the mortgage market is from uh, employment. That's the only thing that can really shock, kind of where we're at now. But this is something to kind of talk with. People are still looking for ways to get equity. HELOCs is pretty much the generic way. Uh, seconds is kind of a, slightly less, you know, less complicated, but more, doesn't have as much flexibility as a HELOC, in terms of, kind of how you can draw on the HELOC over time versus the second you got to take all at once.
Yeah, I've seen some of the ads online that makes me wonder and scared what's going to happen in the next couple of years, where the companies are giving you a credit card, which is a HELOC credit card, to go and spend on whatever you want, and it's a lien against your house. So people don't realize it, that it's not the same as a credit card. The balance that they max out is the balance that you're showing here on the graph, that it's at high interest rate, and it's you can max it out, and then you end up paying a as you said, 12 to 13% on a debt that you just didn't realize.
Right. Well, if
Right,
it's lower
so
rate than a credit card, right? So it's gonna be a lower than the 20% that you're gonna get on your
true.
typical bank card. But bank card, usually you're capped at 10,000 or 15,000. The typical consumer here is like, you may have 50,000, 100,000 of equity to tap. In the old days, you go back to the 90s and before, you get a checkbook, right? HELOCs was a check product. And so you get a checkbook that you can draw on the HELOC, and it would just be processed like a draw, from the bank
Yeah.
effectively. Here, it's always a little, and any kind of delay in, like, spending, right? Credit cards, it's easiest to spend a check. You don't see anyone writing checks anymore in stores, but they used to. Like, that was another. And then cash is like, you don't want to see those dollar bills like leaving your wallet, right? Like, your dad would be like, kind of like very slowly, like, pulling it out when you wanted a piece of candy. Uh, and so, that's kind of the credit card is that definitely affects behavior regarding HELOCs and spending. So, but kind of going on from here, we can talk about maybe the real estate market, residential real estate market, and how it's affecting some of the things that we talked about and the consumer in general. Uh, these are from Altos Research and Compass. And so it really just shows inventories over the years. And so one important line to look at is this one of these gray lines, the one here, right here. That's the 2019 inventory. And so obviously inventory has this little seasonal effect. Inventories rise over the summer. Uh, the orange line is 2018, so you can kind of clearly see that. And the blue line is today, 2025. So we are clearly well above last year, 2024, 24% more inventory than last year. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Partially it's building, it's people needing to move back from their COVID hideout. It's just people looking to sell because they feel they can get a high price now for their house. But we're still below 2019, 2018 levels, which we kind of think of that was a normal housing market. So inventory is still low, uh, relatively to those years, but above last year. But here's why, looking at national numbers, this is from Resi Club, uh, and it shows this is the inventory change from May 2019 to May 2025. And there's a real geographic difference, right? We all know There's a lot of properties that have been on the market now in Austin and Texas and Florida and Arizona. We don't really think of Colorado as, hey, there's a lot of inventory compared to 2019 or Washington, but they're in the green there. That shows they're a lot. And then where I am up here in the Northeast, still a lot less properties for sale than compared to 2019 for a lot of different reasons. One, borrowers have those low rates and not putting their properties on the market. Two, builders stayed away from here. There are high property tax that's gone up more since COVID, and there's really not a lot of land when you look at the urban centers to put new properties. So if you're gonna upsize an old house or knock down an old house, you're only going from one house to another house. You're not knocking down a little property that was on 5 acres and then putting in 25 houses. Like, that's not happening in the Northeast. It's replacing the older house for a newer house, but still a one family house.
Oh,
Wait.
does this chart show us if you would expect the spike in the foreclosure market, it would be Florida, Texas, Tennessee, New Mexico. Is that what you're showing? So we have an oversupply of housing in those overbuilt places, and it just they're longer on the market, and people just don't grab them as in say Pennsylvania and New York.
Well, this is just housing. I think that this would mean that there's more a higher expectation of prices to go down in those areas. Foreclosures is probably Florida has the highest probably job growth in the country right now, and so I wouldn't say that. I would just say, hey, there's a lot of properties there that, but very long term, if you can't place those houses, yeah, like uh, I think it's more about like who's holding these houses and these properties. Like in Texas and Florida, it's more builders versus single borrowers. But for every seller, most sellers are also buyers, right? So if they're going to sell, they're also going to buy. The question is like, how do rates change? I think if rates go down, like the net effect is we'll probably see more net buying because you'll have more people that potentially want to buy, first time home buyers, etc. Like maybe now it gets a little more affordable for them. But I think this tells you, that's where the pressure on price is in these green states. But Colorado wasn't a place that I was really thinking of until I saw that graph. So this is
Yep.
the 6 years, 2019 to 2025. Then if you just want to go year over year, again, this is from Resi Club. Look here. So this is California, Nevada, and Colorado again. So California listings are up, inventory is up 50%. Again, here in the Northeast, it's up, but at least New York is, kind of still single digits. North Dakota is just the outlier. Sorry, it's under 49%, and now it's still like somehow
Nothing changed there.
it's hard to build there. They have kind of a employment kind of drive with shale gas and or oil shale and get fracking, but you know we still see that it's from uh, it's only, let's say California is down 8% or in from 2019 to 2025, but in the last year the listings are up 50%. So it just means that we're seeing now more coming on the market. Even some of the states that we think are these great, Paris, uh, kind of paradises of growth is 50% in North Carolina. Kind of even Georgia. I was surprised that you're kind of seeing that
Yeah.
much. So the idea is that nationally, it's hard to really look at price. Although we're gonna do that right now because of just the diversity in listings across states.
And that challenges the notion that people are, for example, leaving Florida into those three states. And if that would be the case, you would probably see lower numbers in Georgia, in Tennessee, but that's not the case, right? So we can challenge the this big migration from Florida into those states because the inventories are still up, and you know, typically that doesn't happen when either you overbuild so much that you see those percentages very high, or the migration is still not happening the way the media reports it, the way the news outlets report. So that's interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna see a lot of, you see a lot of these kind of fear reports, but ultimately there's I mean, they're still building in some of these states, and I think the reason is because they just feel like they have the job growth and they have the funding. They have the funding to do it, and they feel that they're going to have the job growth. Uh, it just may be an adjustment in price that kind of gets these properties off the market. Uh, okay, but here's the next piece. This is withdrawal ratio. Okay, this is national. Again, this is from Compass. So this shows the percentage of withdrawal listings as a percentage of new listings. So what this means is people basically not selling, taking their house off the market, and obviously it always goes down during the holiday season significantly if you didn't sell your house. But we're seeing well above levels, well above uh, 23 and 24 in the summer here. So people are
Buyers want to sell high. Sorry, the sellers wants to sell high. Buyers don't want to pay that high, right? So there's a gap, which causes this effect, right?
exactly. So buyers are not necessarily getting their price, but they don't necessarily have to sell, right? Because they have those still have those lower rates. But it is definitely more just telling you that the market is nationally is more of a buyer's market. Uh, but ultimately that seller has to agree to the sale. And if they don't necessarily know they don't have to leave, they have a good payment, but they'll kind of stick it out. And ultimately these sellers are also going to be buyers if they think, they're going to have to, like, they're not getting their price here, but maybe they're also going to buy at a cheaper price. Like that's some of the logic that goes into it. But sometimes, people don't think logically. They're thinking, they just want a certain number. And so they'll wait. And so that's what we're kind of seeing here.
Excellent.
And then some of the other items like listings per week versus sales per week. So this is listings per week. Again, this is from Altos and Compass. So listings are, somewhat below uh, last year. It was a little higher earlier in the year. Now it's kind of lower, but it's not kind of in scary levels, but it's still listings are not collapsing, but they're kind of staying at a reasonable level.
It's a
Sales,
healthy market.
yeah. And then, okay, this is just home prices. Again, this is a little like it's hard to really look at home prices on a national basis, but it kind of just shows like, you know, we flattened out. We're not collapsing. People are trying to maintain their level. But we're not seeing kind of like any huge drops or huge increases. Like we've been pretty constant. But sales pending are we've been above last year and now we're starting to fall below. So the question is like, will annual sales be higher than next year? It's going to be close. Like maybe it will be slightly higher. We saw in June kind of our level, sales kind of go over. I think the market may have gotten compressed a little as people were always focused on, think they were getting the better rate. As rates have kind of been kind of recovered and went back up, that slows down sales. And now we're in a place where there is a lot of inventory, but sales are slowing, and that may drive prices. All right.
Nothing scary here.
And then you were talking earlier, Alex, about foreclosures.
Yeah.
Foreclosures are still very low, right? So the blue line, this is from the Fed. The blue line is foreclosures. We're down here, still like sub 2019 levels, but it's kind of like bounced around a little bit. Bankruptcies up a little bit, but still, relatively low compared to 2019 and before levels.
Is
So
that surprising to you, Paul?
I think it means that, people are, they have equity, right? So if you have equity and you could heading to a foreclosure, what can you do? You can sell your house you can do some form of workout, or you can get these home equity product that requires no payment. And so I don't think they really sell these as a form of uh, of way to rescue you, but people can use it for that. If you think you're going to need the money for living expenses or for housing expenses, you can do that. So it's a way to stay in your house without selling it, and you can avoid foreclosure at least for a certain amount of time. At the end, if you still can't maintain that payment, like, you're heading the same way, so maybe a sale was best for you. But we're not seeing, like, the 2008 kind of level of foreclosures, like,
So that makes sense, right? So in other words, if you have a tappable equity that you can grab with the products that are out on the market, either closing seconds, HELOCs, or AGIs, you can grab the money, pay off the delinquency, and since the prices are high, as you showed in the prior charts, you still have a lot of money to go through. So you're delaying the issues that you are facing, either the you lost a job, divorce, or you have no more funds to pay. But at some point it'll catch up. So it'll probably take a few years to exhaust all the equity in your home before you should see a spike. And therefore, what you're showing here is the foreclosures and bankruptcy will probably be at the low levels until that happens. Is that accurate?
yeah, I'd say if borrowers have all this equity, they can still use it. And, again, that's for house payments, but also consumer spending. So we're in this place where we have a lot of equity, and, people willing to finance it. So even though maybe the right answer is to sell your house, take the equity out, and get an affordable, rental, here it's just you're kind of doing the same thing. It's just you're instead of you're just giving the money away, rather than keeping it yourself, right? Like, that's kind of like, ultimately you might end up in the rental still, but you get to stay in your house longer. The concern is really home prices, right? If we see any huge drops nationally of home price, uh, the lenders are going to be a lot more conservative. The HELOCs, like, if you look at Reg Z, if you read your HELOC agreement, they can shut you off of your draws
They can freeze your account for sure. Yeah.
basically whenever they want. That's part of Reg Z. They notify you. They give you that heads up, and so that's something to be concerned about. And then you'd say underwriting is also, uh, going to be very, uh, the originators will be very careful of the underwriting, but you're still seeing, um, if there's reasonable amount of employment, like, then you can still qualify, and you have, so instead of 100 grand, maybe you take out 75 grand. So you're still getting that money. It's the lender is still okay because the CLTV is below the expected CLTV. So that's the one, I think, focus that we'll really see, is that if we have a large national home price decrease, uh, the lenders will really kind of freeze up. They'll kind of back away from a lot of these equity products.
Quick point, Paul. I wanted to mention a quick story. One of our clients had a HELOC out to the borrower. Borrower got delinquent. Either it's an IRS or state tax lien. They froze his account. So if you're the borrower and you're relying on the home equity line of products, make sure that you're current on everything, because they'll freeze your account because you didn't pay one of the other mandatory things, taxes or insurance, etc. And that's it. You have no more draws. You have a black mark on your credit report. So you'd better be current on everything that you have to pay for.
Yeah, it's the same for the credit cards, and we'll go to this next slide. Credit
Yeah.
cards would do the same thing. They do soft pulls pretty much on monthly, and once they see one card go delinquent significantly, and this happened to a family member of mine, they had a medical issue, and their family only took control of all their cards except one. they hit a 90 plus on that card, and all their cards basically got canceled. So your credit cards are definitely monitoring. Um, but here's like, where is credit available right now? So the blue is the current credit card limits versus, or balances. The dark blue versus the light blue is the limits. So this is 5 trillion. This is from the Fed. HELOCs, let's say we're at 400 billion versus maybe just below 1 trillion of limit. Now, this doesn't anticipate like these are, so this is the undrawn part of the HELOC. So there's still maybe 500 billion to draw, but a lot of people don't have HELOCs yet. So you can, this is just what's outstanding. Obviously, credit cards are the easy access. Uh, it's what people draw on every day. Uh, and there's a lot of volume. But I'd say once you start, like, this is like you said, this is a little misleading, because if you start maxing out all your cards, like one of the card providers is going to be like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And they may cap you. These guys are between, the use of AI and models. They have this locked down. They know when a borrower is going to do something to their detriment, and they try to prevent it. And right, obviously, they have to follow all the federal regulations that they're required to, but they're anticipating. A lot of these originators use trended credit reports, so they see, they're not just looking at your FICO score. They're looking at your process of borrowing and paying down your debts.
They're looking at the inquiry dates, how many credit cards you opened, all the trend line, the available tappable equity, the usage ratio of the credit card. So all of that is monitored on a monthly basis. So if you're the borrower, you better pay attention to how many credit cards you apply at the same time.
Yeah, and we know that the FICO score is not what it used to be, in the sense of, if you were 700, 20 years ago, it's not the same as being a 700 today, because just the borrowers are more knowledgeable. Like, they know how to uh, either get bad data off their card or off their account, or things like that. So there's a lot more knowledge that wasn't really, just because people just are more they have more tools. They can access the data more easily through the internet. Years ago, if you wanted to get your credit score, you had to mail in something, and you had to like run stuff. Now every lender gives your credit score to you for free, or some form of a credit score on your statement, or in your through your account. So borrowers are a lot more aware of their credit score, and they make sure that they use all the tools that they can to maintain that score. But this just shows, there's a lot of availability to spend, and in the equity side, home equity, like, this is just a very small piece of it, right? Um, Transition delinquency. This is by age, so we can kind of, we'll kind of like start ending it here. This is like your uh, typical boomer versus Gen Z versus millennial kind of fight. Maybe throw Gen X in there. Uh, Mortgages, like, by age, are still, they kind of line up pretty well. Uh, there's not a lot of difference across delinquency for by age, because of all that equity. But if you start getting into then credit cards, right? So these are auto loans. Excuse me, auto
And
loans.
that's
And
expected, right? The younger folks have a higher delinquency. Yeah.
younger folks have a higher delinquency. The 30 to 39-year-olds, etc. Okay, credit card, you're going to see something similar. Transitions are starting to turn off, but you still see that. But then let's look at I think the last one. Here's a surprise. Uh, Delinquency by age. This is transition. 50 plus on the student loans. They're the highest. All right. Then the 40 to 49s are the second highest. Then the 30 39s.
How does that make sense?
Well, there's a lot of student loan debt that uh, are that's very old. Uh, I think something like 200 billion is student loan debt of 60-year-olds, right? So student loan debt is also parent loans. So parents,
So
the old program was called the Plus program. I forget the new post Obama name of it, but it was a parent loan program. So I think over 200 billion is by 60-year-olds, and they have less access to income repayment and other processes. Like they can't go get a job as a teacher, like they're retiring. So there's less options for them for like the forgiveness programs where you could do years of service or become a teacher or something like that. Or there's maybe less knowledge. I mean, some of these people, like, maybe they're never paying, right? But like the numbers before, these are transition rates. These aren't percentages,
yeah,
but still, it's like, that they knew it was coming. I guess they just ignored it. And then uh, the question is, what is the government going to do to these people here? Are they going to garnish their wages? Are they going to go after the Social Security? I don't know. I don't think these questions have been answered. They're definitely they go after your IRS refund, and now it's due. So this is what the this is the other piece of driving consumer spending, right? Any If you're paying back a loan that you thought you never had to pay back, that's going to come out of other sources of consumer spending. So you have this maybe dichotomy back and forth of paying back student loan debt, which is not insignificant, 1.7 trillion versus 34 trillion of home equity that's out there. So maybe people access, really half of it. And that equity, if we go all the way back to that first slide, let me see if we can go back to it easily. Um, there you go, 34 trillion. This is all houses, including houses that don't have mortgages. There's some other, I think ICE puts out a just for equity on properties that have a mortgage. I think it's more like 15 to 20 trillion. I don't remember the exact number. So this is everything. I think it was something like 40% of houses or US residents don't have mortgages. Uh, but you can, like, you just pay a higher rate as a cash out. So that's one thing that we need to be aware of. Uh, like, how is all this going to affect consumer spending and ultimately the economy? I think as long as there's is accessible equity and it's sizable, that it limits the possibility of having a recession or a significant drop in consumer spending. They can access this. Now, that doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. But we look at, we haven't talked about AI and where job growth is going. Like, that's another side of it that, if you have a college graduate, like I've talked to a lot of college graduates, it is very difficult in 2025 to get a job out of college versus just 2024 because the use of different tools uh, really limits the need for new employees, right? New employees are usually not very useful for 3 to 6 months. Like they're getting trained.
that's right.
They're not, unless you're doing something very specific that you learned in college, like maybe being a nurse or being, some kind of,
Human labor will never go away. Folks that are general contractors, nurses, doctors, even attorneys, it will not go away. But folks that are into programming, art, design, things that are replaceable by AI, I would be worried, right? So in my own business, we stopped hiring pretty much because of that. A lot of the things that we do for underwriting and credit compliance are AI based, right? All the data typing, extraction, some of the rule checking. You don't need people, and in fact, the lenders, all of them are playing around with AI. So I'm worried. In fact, today some of the folks from LinkedIn contacted me. Hey, Alex, we see you on LinkedIn all the time. Can you recommend my son to apply somewhere? I have no recommendations. No recommendations.
yeah, I'll disagree with you on legal. I talked to one of my attorneys, and they were basically saying, I'm telling everyone I know not to become an attorney, and I'm teaching everyone in my office, I'm requiring them to learn AI. So it's it is definitely something like anything kind of bureaucratic, repeatable, uh, kind of following a process that can be that deals with that can be quantized into each a quantization, I guess, into like tasks that you can control. Like it's definitely a good candidate to be on AI. Even uh, you know, I'm talking to people on the home building side. They have now methods to do a lot of construction. And it's not these 3D printed houses made out of concrete. It's definitely like a traditional looking house. There's products that are it's going to take some time to you're not going to go work on a 100-year-old house with a robot, right? You need someone, a craftsman that has the knowledge and the experience to know how to just, kind of weave a new wire in somewhere or a pipe or whatever it needs to be. Uh, but for something brand new, I think there's a lot of possibilities for using AI in terms of changing the plans, robotics in terms of actually accessing the site. And it really comes down to the cost of labor. I mean, that's why there's not a lot of home building in the Northeast. The cost of labor in the Northeast is so expensive that you really can't build these massive, like 3, 4, 500 uh, building communities in any kind of reasonable amount of time because we have cold weather, right? We have like there's going to be stoppages. There's going to be um, other processes. Like they even in the New York City, like they are starting to build modularly. So meaning like they're coming with like set units of concrete walls, concrete floors, uh, with all the plumbing and AC ducts all connected, and the guys just connect them. There's been a big push to keep it out, but I think ultimately, it's now something that you kind of need because you can't get it done any other way. Uh, Long term, like you said, the giving advice to like where people should go. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think become an AI designer is probably the deal with AI, robotics, or drones is probably a good advice for someone that's going into college, coming out of college, even developers. There's a lot of very low level programming that the new employee would do, which now you can do with a cursory
Fully
AI
replaced.
or another
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, so let's wrap this up. It was very, very, heavy on data podcast, and I encourage people to watch it twice and follow Paul on LinkedIn. Go to his website. Any final words, Paul, where people can get in touch with you and follow you?
Yeah, I think I'm most active on X. So if you go to Paul__Mangione, Mangione, that's probably an easy way to kind of see what I'm working on. LinkedIn, I'm on there. And then those are the two places I'm probably most active. So look there and you can see what I'm working on.
Sounds good, Paul. I appreciate your time. Great data. Looking forward to catch up next year with all the updated data as well.
Okay, let's make it a tradition. Okay, Al, thanks again.
Sounds good. Thanks. Take care, Paul. Bye.
Take care.